The phone conversation between fantasy veterans Bob Harris and Matt Waldman is a quick and dirty rundown of players, units, or teams from Sunday's games. Feel it or fuck it is our instant verdict on the fantasy value of a player or situation, not the ability, effort, or character of the player. This is just how two old-timers in this industry talk when they got a lot to cover in a little time.
Matt Waldman, here we are, July 17th. It's like things are actually starting to happen. We'll have things to talk about. This is the Feel It or Fuck It podcast. I'm Bob Harris. He's Matt Waldman. Find him on Twitter at Matt Waldman. That's a really tough way to go, Matt. I'm at Football Diehards. Go to the website, footballdiehards.com. Find the latest pro fantasy sports publications there, including the 34th edition of the Pro Forecast with an article by the great Matt Waldman in it that you will love. Also, the Football Diehards magazine promo code Diehards gets you 15% off of anything you buy there. Also, go to mattwaldman.com. There's a rookie scouting portfolio that has all the things you need to know right now in your dynasty drafts and everything. So purchase that as well. Matt, how are you today, sir?
Wow, Bob, you are on it on a Monday morning. I'm telling you, I just ran a bunch of errands and I could, and then I had a little breakfast, and now I'm like, compared to you, I feel like someone pumped you up full of Red Bull.
I sat on the pretend bike for 20 plus miles and had plenty of time to think about it. So there you have it. It takes me a long time to do 20 miles, I'll assure you. Apparently, DeAndre Hopkins has some travel in his future. Signed with the Tennessee Titans, one of the two teams that were interested in him. Saw an interesting statistic here, Matt Waldman. Mike Vrabel, the former NFL linebacker, now head coach of the Titans, had the most career receiving touchdowns on the Titans roster until they added DeAndre Hopkins on Sunday. Vrabel with 12 career TDs ahead of Chris Moore, Nick Westbrook, and Keenan, and Treylon Burks with just one. Let me ask you this, Matt. DeAndre Hopkins, we have the landing spot. Are you feeling him as a fantasy wide receiver 2 in this Titans offense?
I am feeling him as a fantasy wide receiver 2 in this offense, and I would say he qualifies for me to feel him because he's in that border between a low-end wide receiver 2, high-end wide receiver 3, at least my first initial look at projecting him. And I'm probably going to study some film today of Hopkins and then also Tannehill and see if there's anything that's going to change my mind. But if you look at Tannehill back in 2020, he had his best year with the Titans. And I think that Hopkins can be that 800, 900 yard player, maybe lead the team in targets, and be up there in receiving touchdowns, somewhere between 7 and 9. I think is reasonable, and I can see the idea of Tannehill spreading the ball around well enough that you'll see a lot of players kind of in a similar spot, And I think Hopkins, to me, if the running backs, catch a few. They're probably not going to catch as many as I thought they would now that we have Hopkins in there. And that means to me that we're probably going to see Hopkins be in the 900-yard range, plus or minus 100 yards, maybe get over 1,000, maybe even get over 10 touchdowns if he is the true leader in this offense. But I wouldn't write off the other players because of Hopkins' arrival.
We'll talk about some of those here in just a second. On Hopkins, by the way, Tim Kelly, now the offensive coordinator in Tennessee, was the offensive coordinator, or I think he started out his career as an offensive quality control assistant, down at the bottom of the ranks in Houston when Hopkins was there. And I think his the 1 year Kelly served as Hopkins offensive coordinator was the
wide
last
receiver
season.
5 year.
Right, exactly. He had 104 catches, 1,165 yards, and 7 touchdowns. So he does know how to use them. We'll see how this offense plays out. And you mentioned you're going to look at the film. I recall our friend Doug Farrar at USA Today did a little bit of a study, when Hopkins was first started being some discussions he might move on and what he was best suited as. And Doug contends that, Hopkins is no longer that true X guy, that down the field threaten opposing defenses. He's going to morph into more of the big slot player who's capable of doing serious damage still in that regard. We saw Larry Fitzgerald make that transition as well at a point in his career. I don't know what you think about that, but I do think, I'm feeling him now as a wide receiver 2, just based on volume. So that brings up some of those other pieces. Treylon Burks has been going, I think, on Underdog Fantasy at wide receiver 35. So tail end of the wide receiver threes. Does this drop him down into the 4 territory for you, or are you still comfortable where he's at?
No, I'm comfortable where he is, and I'm higher than him than other people are. I think he's more of a borderline low end wide receiver 2, high end wide receiver 3. I think he's going to have a shot to lead this team in touchdowns, and I think that he's going to be probably the leader in yards per catch average. And we're going to see a jump from Burks this year. I think that what you get here is the players who get hurt by Hopkins are going to probably be Okonkwo in yardage, but we'll talk about him a little more because I don't think it hurts him a ton. It's probably going to hurt Kyle Phillips, a fair bit.
Volume.
And Chris Moore, who, was kind of a sneaky good player for the Titans, not necessarily a sneaky good fantasy player, except on maybe bye weeks. But now you kind of take away from all of those players, and it probably hurts Tyjae Spears and Derrick Henry's reception totals as well. So, Burks to me is going to be almost even in yardage with Hopkins, and then maybe have 3 to 4 more touchdowns and be the touchdown leader in this. Because with Hopkins, as you mentioned with Doug Farrar talking about it, hard to really set, you can bet on the age part of it, and you can kind of have a fudge factor to talk about, well, he's no longer this, and that may be, and I trust Doug's eyes in terms of what he saw with them in Arizona, but at the same time, what you see in Arizona may not be absolutely the truth about what the player can or cannot do. It's just what he showed, and what he showed in Arizona was that he was working with a quarterback that throws better in the middle of the field.
And the least creative offensive mind, apparently, in all of football.
Exactly.
Cliff Kingsbury.
So. Yeah. So, I mean, he can dominate up with two-way goes, and you're probably going to see him get a lot of those. Whereas, if they do that type of thing in Tennessee fairly often, he's going to dominate there too. But I think they'll be able to put him on the outside. And he doesn't have to be the X. He could even be the Z. They can put him at the Z and put Burks at the X. And that means that he doesn't have as much press coverage. So there's going to be maybe more quick hitting routes for him on top of that. And, they're going to be able to mix and match with Phillips in the slot, with Okonkwo split out. So I think all of that's going to benefit Hopkins and Burks in terms of matchups that they can engineer for those two guys.
All right, you bring up the Chig Okonkwo. Currently going off as tight end 11 on Underdog Fantasy, Best Ball ADP. I know on Football Guys, I talked to one of the staffers there a week or so ago. It sounded like he was a tight end 10 on the consensus rankings there. Does this slow that roll a little bit? I think we all, I want to say, so let me just put a fine point on this, Matt Waldman. Chig Okonkwo, still everybody's darling tight end. Feel it or fuck it.
I think that he still is in the rankings part, but maybe the upside part is going to be not as darling, because I think I had him at TE7 maybe on my board. I think he falls around the range of Dalton Kincaid for me, and Dalton Kincaid has more upside. So, low end tight end 1, but I think that's you're drafting him closer to his ceiling now, because I think the yardage is going to go down. Yeah, he averaged 14 yards per catch last year. But who did they have? And then you look at the number of targets and receptions he had. I think he's going to get more targets, and the value of those targets is going to drop in terms of the length of those targets. So you're going to see him probably hover around that 10 to 11 yards per catch range, which means probably lower yardage totals than what we were projecting. Now that he's not going to be that guy. But I think the touchdown numbers are still going to be pretty strong. I wouldn't be surprised at all if it's almost a 3-way tie in touchdowns between Hopkins, Burks, and Okonkwo.
That implies there will be passing touchdowns, which implies the possibility that Ryan Tannehill, currently going as quarterback 32, is being wildly overlooked. Are you feeling that, or fuck Ryan Tannehill?
No, I'm feeling that, because Ryan Tannehill is a pretty good quarterback. And to me, a pretty good NFL quarterback is the type of guy that people just dog when he doesn't have weapons. But when he has weapons, he can be a top 10, maybe even higher ranked fantasy guy, kind of like Jared Goff, in that sense that last time Tannehill had a strong group of players, and I believe it was Corey Davis, and I'm trying to think of the second guy that they had. I can see it real. Yeah, okay. It was Corey Davis, and let's look it up here, because Tannehill had 3,800 yards and 33 touchdowns in 2020, and A.J. Brown and Corey Davis were the two receivers there, and they combined for 16 touchdowns and over 2,000 yards on 135 receptions. Just those two players. So if I think DeAndre Hopkins is better than Corey Davis, I don't think Treylon Burks is quite A.J. Brown yet, and I'm not sure he ever will be, but he'll be close enough in this offense that I think you can expect a good 18 to 2,000 yards combined between Hopkins and Burks. And then when you look at the tight end, Jonnu Smith had 8 touchdowns.
Yeah.
In
Right.
2020, and off 448 yards. So when you look at that, I mean, Ryan Tannehill averaged almost 8 yards per attempt in 2020, and I think that there's more weapons this year than what there was in 2020, because after Brown and Davis, you had Adam Humphries and Khalif Raymond and a young Nick Westbrook-Akine. I think, and then at tight end, Jonnu Smith is not, and Anthony Ferkser almost had 400 yards. So if you combine even Smith and Ferkser, they had basically from the tight end position, they had 80 catches for, over 800 yards and 9 touchdowns just from the tight end position from the top 2 guys. So there's, I look at this offense, and there's enough with the run game and in every position for Tannehill to threaten for 4,000 yards and 30 touchdowns. And I'm buying into that at his current value, and I think it's going to stay rather flat just because the ageists, man, they are so good in fantasy football at repressing the level of true value with the fear of guys falling off of cliffs. I mean, look, they predicted Bob Harris to be falling off the cliff 20 years ago, and he's still here. Sure. So, I just put it that way. And
to be fair, I fell off the cliff. I had to climb back up, and it took me some extra time. But I'm here. I am still here.
I think I'm off the cliff, like sunning in the water right now at this point. But that's okay. Yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about my tight end 7. Tight end 7. You got Chig Okonkwo. I got Evan Engram as my tight end 7. Got a new deal, 3 years, $41 million, coming off a career season. Look, he's kind of been uneven over the course of his career, but in this ascendant offense with one Trevor Lawrence as the trigger man, had a great season, career year in all his numbers. So are you feeling him? So Calvin Ridley is there. Some things are changing, but this still seems to be an offense on the rise. We're going to talk about Trevor Lawrence in a second. Are you still feeling Evan Engram as a top 10 asset, or was last year fluky to you?
No, I'm feeling it. I think that really he's a player that, as long as he's protected somewhat by other skilled players that take some of the pressure off of him, he does great as a matchup option. And you can target him with a high volume, and you can expect a pretty good return from him. I mean, last year, 73 receptions, 766 yards, 4 touchdowns. I think I've been projected pretty close to that, maybe even higher totals as a receiver in terms of yardage and touchdowns this year. So I like him in that range. You got to remember that, they lost. Zay Jones plus Marvin Jones as players equals Calvin Ridley. So you can do a little bit more with those guys. You still have Jones, or Zay Jones. So Kirk, Ridley, and Zay Jones with Engram, that's a great matchup there. And you get a little bit more with the running backs in terms of some of the things that room can do. Trevor Lawrence is going to be 1 year better. I expect him to be more efficient. No reason to be down on Engram as some sort of fluke unless we start to hear something boneheaded coming out of camp about his maturity and work ethic. If that happens, I'd drop him off a cliff, but that ain't happening.
He was the 3rd highest target rate there last year, and I think you're probably about right. I'm trying to look for Zay Jones' current ADP. He's down the ranks a fair amount. Or are you totally off him? Is it fuck Zay Jones season, or does he still have some value to you?
I think he still has some potential value to me, but I mean, looking at Jones, where I have him right now is more in that 500-yard, 4 touchdowns range, more of a bye week option. He had 800 yards and 5 touchdowns last year. So I think he's the guy that's probably going to lose a little bit out of the 4 that we mentioned: Kirk, Ridley, Engram, and Jones.
Let me put it like this: wide receiver 57, his current ADP. Feel it or fuck it.
I'm feeling that.
Yeah, it seems like reasonable to me. It's an ascendant offense, and by the way, the quarterback part of that ascension, right? And some numbers came out this week, I think, from NFL Research, putting him pretty historic improvement. Statistically, there was a case to be made. His improvement was like any other player's. This from NFL Research. He went from a passer rating of 71.9 in 2021 to 95.2 in 2022. It's the largest increase in NFL history for a quarterback who threw at least 400 passes in each of his first 2 seasons. He's going well inside the top 10, Matt. Are we overstating the case here? Or is it a are we looking at the possibility of him moving into the top 5 at his position?
Oh, I think he's absolutely a top 5 player at his position. He's currently number 5 in my long build dynasty rankings that are available at mountwaldman.com. You can find them there. And then win now cheat sheets. I mean, I also have him 5th on my board. So to me, he's already moved into that range. He's a smart player. He was one of the best prospects at his position in quite a long time. And I think that and though there were a lot of people who, said that was a little bit overstated or overrated after the first year, I mean, I just blame Urban Meyer. That was an absolute mess for him to land in.
Totally 100% agree with you on that. I don't think there's anyone who can argue with this. I think Shad Khan would tell you something along those lines in much more colorful language than we use, and we say fuck it a lot here. So there you have that. Would like to hear Shad going off on that. Joe Mixon. We finally have some resolution, it seems, Matt Waldman. I don't know about the off-field issue. Go to Drew Davenport FF on Twitter to find out all the latest about that. He does great work there. But in terms of the money, Joe Mixon took significant pay cuts in each of the next 2 years to stay in Cincinnati for, it would appear, 2 more years. Right now, do you feel like everyone who is drafting him at a cheap price got a great value? Are you still are you looking to move him up your rankings, or fuck it, you're just going to roll with him where he's at?
No, I'm still feeling him. I had him playing full 17 games this year, had him earning 1,000 yards on the ground and really almost 1,500 yards total with close to 10 touchdowns. I might move him up a little bit now, mainly because that deal tells you 2 things.
Yes.
2 things. One is that he knew he screwed up big time and that he does not want to be like the cast-offs of who are as good or better than he is on the open market. And when I say that, I'm talking about Dalvin Cook and maybe Kareem Hunt for a year, and even Ezekiel Elliott in the right system. I think Ezekiel Elliott in Cincinnati would be a lot better than people realize. And if they could bring in any one of those 3 guys into that system and not lose much, I think someone gave him some good advice and he listened. And he wants to be around for a Super Bowl. This is Joe Burrow is one of the 3 best. I think he's one of the 3 best quarterbacks in the league if you're not talking about fantasy, just reality.
Right.
And I would take him over Josh Allen as great of a physical talent that Josh Allen is, and obviously he's much more than just a physical talent. I think Joe Burrow's ability to create is more mature, and I think he's just a smarter, more technically accomplished quarterback. And with that weaponry, I mean, Jamar Chase, all those guys, how are you not going to want to stay in that offense during that window? And look at a guy like Travis Kelce, who's not making what he deserves, but he's like, I'd rather win games. I'd rather win championships. That's the smart play. You play longer, and you play in a better system, and if you have the perspective to go, I'm making enough money, I'm taking care of my money, and I'm getting to play with people who I think are good and I respect, and they know me and I can contribute, I'm going to stay in this situation as long as I can.
Yeah, I think that's the thing. You go from, 10 or 12 million or something to, half that or three quarters of that. You're still coming out okay. I agree with you on Burrow. I think, there's that handful of quarterbacks that kind of raise to the level of giving you that extra coach on the field in addition to a quarterback. I think it's an important benefit for a team. I don't know that it does much for us as fantasy players, maybe a little bit to boost the value of the pieces around them. But from an NFL perspective, I think it's proven to be really good, said Tom Brady. And a whole stack of rings. And also Patrick Mahomes, for that matter. I think, you have that quarterback that's so tied to the coach, has such an understanding of the scheme and what they want to have happen. Those two would be prime examples of that, Matt Waldman. You can take that to the bank. Alvin Kamara! We have some clarity last week after we did this podcast. We got some news that Alvin Kamara had pled no contest to all his charges. I want to say the aforementioned Drew Davenport, who's pretty cagey about these things, put out some vague guesstimates, right? So I think, what did he have? A two-game suspension, like at about 10% or 20%, 4 to 6 games. The heavy preponderance, and it's slightly less likely that it would be longer than that. I'm feeling this is a 6-game suspension appealed to 4 games. Like he showed contrition by admitting and paying the dependent off. And, I think the only question here is how seriously the league looks at this video and feels it damages their public relations. Again, the personal conduct policy is a public relations policy. People don't twist it up. And so if they feel like this is going to fly under the radar and how horrible the beatdown was, and it was pretty bad. If you go take a minute to watch it, it was pretty bad. But I feel like that's a middle range. So now that we have at least the degree of clarity that we know resolution is coming, are you more inclined to be drafting Alvin Kamara right now, or less inclined?
I think I'm about the same until I see how the like you said, how the public's going to react to the video, because we are in a takedown culture, and
right.
So and I'm not saying that Alvin Kamara, what he's doing is a takedown in a negative sense, because clearly he, you saw what he did,
yeah.
But so before all this, I had him at 8 games played, and really second on the team in rushing, and second on the depth chart in receiving, and really Jamal Williams being the main guy. I'll put it to you this way: the ceiling for Alvin Kamara gets substantially higher from what happened, because you could see the outcome being 4 to 6 games, maybe just 4, maybe even 2, as crazy as that sounds, And if that happens, and the Saints' offensive line stays healthy, they have one of the better offensive lines, or could have one of the better offensive lines in the league. Matt Breida, who does great work at footballguys.com studying offensive lines, has them rated as a top 5 unit based on them being able to be healthy. I mean, Trevor Penning is a fine prospect. Cesar Ruiz played really well. Their weakest link might be, I'm trying to remember his name, the kid what's his name? I don't know. I don't remember the kid's name, but he's the other tackle, who Andre Pete. I don't remember his name, but he's probably their weak link. Their tackle might be their weakest link. And if that's the case, this team could be a very strong offensive unit. And if Kamara only plays 12 games, Andres Pete, that's the guy's name, then you're talking about Kamara maybe having RB1 upside again. But right now, I would say the conservative estimate is to still look at 8 games. If you're going to be a little bit more bullish just because you don't want to lose out on the value, then maybe put him at 4 games suspension.
And still Kendre Miller floats around out there, and I buy the cheap piece, and you never know. Hoping for the best. For the best. We'll see soon enough. I think the big news on this is now the door is open for the punishment to come out. I have one of the guys in one of my leagues, the day that this news came out, said, word on the street is Kamara's not going to be suspended. And I said, oh, so the street you live on is Park Avenue, because I think unless it is, you probably don't know.
That's about as good. That's about as good as when I used to say things like if my pets came into the room when certain players were being talked about, then then I knew certain good things. I said, but considering I've only had this dog, haven't had this dog for a full football season yet. The fact he came in when you mentioned Alvin Kamara, that can either be a good thing or a bad thing. I have no idea.
I do think. I mean, in a league where one person has the power to make or break these, make these decisions, and Roger Goodell, and I mean there is an appeal process, etc. But we have a pretty good history of what he likes to do. But I do think the fact that he's shown contrition by paying off, I think this is something the NFL does pay attention to. So,
unless he has video of something with Roger Goodell in an elevator, I don't think not much is going to change.
My mind strays. All right. Tony Pollard, it turns out, is going to play. The reporting today is he will not get a long-term deal done. I don't think anyone really has been pushing for that because he signed his tag right out of the gate, unlike Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs, who we'll talk about here momentarily. So Pollard is playing on the tag. I don't think that's a real surprise. I was talking to our friend Derek Brown from Fantasy Pros the other day. He has Tony Pollard as his running back one. Feel it or fuck it.
I mean, oh man, when I look at Pollard, certainly can be a top 10 running back. We've already seen that.
Here, yeah.
It's already done it. So, but I'd say fuck it because overall he has to prove that he can handle the workload. And that's something that coaches have been openly concerned about.
Yep.
So for me, he's in the bottom half of the top 10, where you could project the outside chance at a top 5 season. But I believe you're going to see a veteran in town, whether it's Elliott again or another player, once they start to see how Pollard is physically doing after the first 3 weeks of the season.
You are correct, and they were they're the ones who put this out last year that they felt like he was best, and I don't think this was assistant coach, the running backs coach put it out there. I don't think he was putting it out on the team's official website unless it's something the team officially wanted to put out there. Is that they like him better with a certain number of snap counts, not necessarily touches, a snap count, right? They feel like he's great with 30 snaps, whatever. So fewer touches than that, but he still managed a career high in touches, and maybe he gets more this year. So I think he's going at the right spot would be what I'm saying. Going inside the top 10, top 12 running backs.
I would feel Rico Dowdle being a fantasy asset as a bye week option more than I would feel Tony Pollard being an RB1 right now. And I don't think that's a high probability thing either.
All right, we're recording this Monday early in the day. The deadline for signing, for getting the long-term deals done is 4 p.m. Eastern time today. So those things aren't done with Saquon Barkley. Sounds, talked to Chris Bisciano from Giant Insider. He thinks that Saquon Barkley will get done, but we've heard various reports on that. I don't want to get too far into it because it'll all change by the time you're listening to this. So we'll just say it like this. Matt Breida as a hedge. Is he being overlooked? I don't hardly ever see him going in any drafts. Shouldn't he be of interest to people, if nothing else, that he's the next man up behind Saquon Barkley, regardless of the contract?
I think that there's always a chance because when you look at what he did in San Francisco a number of years ago, there's certainly talent to his game, but because of the stops that he's made and the low impact that he's had ever since, both in Buffalo and in New York, I would say that you probably don't need to make him a priority because the Giants will probably look for another back if Barkley doesn't work out.
Switch to a silver helmet and do the same exercise. We know Josh Jacobs seems a little less likely to get that deal than Saquon Barkley, who is not by no means certain to. And Jacobs has been making some pretty, raucous noise about him going to take this all the way to the mats and not going to mess around and maybe not, get into play. So same exercise, Zamir White. Are we overlooking him?
Probably because I don't know of any former New England Patriots backs that our coach Josh McDaniels would sign unless he wants to bring Tim Tebow back in and use him as a fullback / running back hybrid. But White being the draft pick in that regime, I think he gets a good shot. You could see maybe even Britton Brown getting an opportunity. He's another one that would be on the list to consider. Amir Abdullah. It'll probably be a full-fledged 3 running back committee of horror for fantasy players.
As we get closer to the start of the season, it seems like the universe in which one Brock Purdy is not ready to play week 1 is becoming almost non-existent. Yet still we see Trey Lance being drafted. I've seen him in drafts recently. Scott Fishbowl draft saw him go well ahead of players named, I don't know, Ryan Tannehill, Jimmy Garoppolo, among others, feel it or fuck it, drafting Trey Lance right now.
Oh, fuck that. And I love Trey Lance as a prospect, but it's over in San Francisco. Right? And unless they have to start him due to injury, it's over. They, adding Sam Darnold to that mix, he's clearly going to be quarterback 2, and Purdy's number 1. Lance is too long of a timeline of development, I think, or he just didn't bring the right flavor of coffee to the facility for Kyle Shanahan. So I think that Trey Lance they're going to try and trade him at some point.
That was not even a subtle jab. I want to get this one in. Antonio Gibson is, a lot of talk about him being a receiving asset this year in this offense. Former college wide receiver. Maybe he can do this. Hasn't been used that way up to this point. Eric Bieniemy coming into this offense. Are you feeling a little more optimistic about Antonio Gibson's 2023 season than others?
No, because of the fact that they do want to move him back to wide receiver, or the idea that he wants to be used more as a wide receiver. That tells you that he doesn't feel like he's going to get enough opportunities as a running back, that he wants to be used more in that option. Now, I'll say this. I scouted Gibson both as a runner and a receiver, and I had a higher grade for Gibson as a receiver than I did for him as a runner. And there's some potential for him as a slot receiver, but where's he going to be used? Because unless Curtis Samuel gets hurt, and he played a full 17 games last year, he's not going to find the field with Jahan Dotson and Terry McLaurin there. I mean, unless they're going 4 wide all the time, and that's not happening. They've got a good tight end. So for me, this is Gibson maybe trying to somehow do whatever he can to see playing time. And I don't know. I think it's a bad thing for him ultimately.
I'm going to call you out for your slander by omission of my man Curtis Samuel. Shame on you, Matt Waldman. I don't feel that's appropriate.
How did I omission?
I thought you didn't mention his name.
No, he's the first guy I mentioned.
Oh, okay.
See, look at you. I'm going to call you out for what?
Call me out for
that plant. That plant's tendrils are getting into your ears, man. Yeah. See, there we go.
It's smarter than me. I have it on good authority. All right, Anthony Richardson, Jim Irsay channeling his inner Bob Harris, says Anthony Richardson needs to play. He says acknowledge it's going to be tough, but he's been through this with other quarterbacks, right? Coming in and starting right away. Peyton Manning had a tough start, but he had an extensive college background. Anthony Richardson lacks that, yet Irsay feels that it's important for Anthony Richardson to be on the field and to play to get better. Feel that or fuck it?
This is the quintessential owner statement. Owners are so fucking impatient, and they're always they're the reason that when they saw Ben Roethlisberger as a rookie, they're all like, we need a player like him, and we need to have him start right away. And tons of quarterbacks got flash fried and burnt to a crisp because of owners getting influenced by somebody talking to them, whether it was at the golf club, the steam room, the rub and tug, whatever, wherever they were, at the, sorry, Bob Kraft, what do you want me to tell you? You've won a lot of Super Bowls, but, and he didn't have his guy start right away. He didn't even know who that guy was until he came up to him, practically slapped him in the face by saying, I'm going to be the best best decision you ever made. And pretty much was. But, I think Richardson's going to play by week 6. I think having Gardner Minshew in there over the first 4 to 6 weeks would be wise. And the only reason that is that it's not that Richardson has to get used to the speed of the game physically. There's a lot of checks and verbiage and things that might take a little longer for any quarterback to have to handle. And why not let him get up to speed mentally, like a lot of quarterbacks don't get afforded to do, and allow him to just kind of be a more active participant on the sideline, getting kind of geared up there, and then coming in, or getting some intermittent playing time. I'd be okay with saying, we're gonna look, Gardner, we know what you are, you know what you are, you're gonna be in the league for the next 12 years doing exactly what we're doing with you right here, which is you're going to play the first half. We're going to put Richardson in for a couple series in the third quarter. in this game, and then you're going to come back and do that. And then by game 3, we're going to put Richardson in to start the game, and if he fucks up then really badly, we're going to take him out and say, look, Anthony, you're still our guy, you're our future. If Gardner can get it close after you've watched why you fucked up on the sideline a little bit here, we'll put you back in. The Marty Schottenheimer method with Drew Brees. If they could do that, that's the ideal. But I would look at it this way. Irsay's tired, and he thinks that he has all the answers, and the money says he does because he's accountable for everything. Yeah. So he's probably gonna dictate this. But if I could be the outsider in that room that could pull him out of whatever the influencers are on the ESPN and the golf course and the Fox Network, I'm the devil on the other shoulder. All those other
play him, Jim.
Yeah,
play him.
Yeah, I just tell him, listen, you already fucked up with your daddy fucked up with the move from Baltimore already.
Picture this, listeners. Matt Waldman is the angel on one of Irsay's shoulders. I'm the devil on the other.
That works because we're both battle angels at that point. So
all right, let's get this closer to a happy ending here.
And Jamir Gibbs got there with the rub and tug with Bob Kraft.
Jamir Gibbs. There is no secret that I have become enamored with him based on the draft capital expended, the price he's going in drafts compared to Bijan Robinson, who's probably going in the first half of the first round, and I can wait to the 4th round to get Gibbs. I know David Montgomery's there, but also I know Brad Holmes, the GM, is making comparisons to Marshall Faulk, a guy he knew with the Rams in 2003, and also Christian McCaffrey when he came out, and he feels like this is a guy that can run routes as a slot receiver, but also run it. Feel or fuck it, those lofty comparisons. Is it something you appreciate, or should he not be putting this pressure on my guy, Jahmyr Gibbs?
Well, Brad Holmes must read the RSP a little bit because the RSP actually compared Gibbs as like an aspirational Marshall Faulk. But I'll say this. In terms of how he can be used in the passing game, the fact that his baseline level of skill as a runner is good enough that he's not going to have to be taken off the field or used as predictably as DeAndre Swift, makes him an upgrade to Swift already. Now, for him to be Faulk or Christian McCaffrey, he's going to have to be a good tier to 2 tiers better as a runner. And I would say I don't think he's ever going to quite get there. But in terms of how the popular media is going to see it, the comparison to Faulk is probably going to be a decent enough one. I joke that he was between 2 Faulks. He was between Kevin Faulk and Marshall Faulk as a comparison. And he's a little better than Kevin as a runner, not quite as good as Marshall as a runner, and still has more to prove in terms of how savvy of a receiver he can be. But in this offense, yeah, you should be excited about him this year.
I feel him faulking it. Let's see, one more here. Amon-Ra St. Brown, still tracking. He's got a notebook, apparently. He tracks the 16 wide receivers taken ahead of him. Are you feeling that?
I'm fucking feeling that, man. So I think that a lot of that, I mean, I just love that players who are motivated and they work hard. You know, if you're going to use the chip on the shoulder thing and you're a hard worker and you're a producer, I don't mind that at all because you probably have it in perspective. You just use that as a psychological thing. Now, if you're someone who doesn't work at all, always getting in trouble, and you're putting on a Super Bowl ring and you're telling people that you're flipping them off, you know, a city. You know, as much as I like Kadarius Toney this year, that is my concern. It's like, dude, really? Like, are you going to grow up a little bit? Can you grow up just a little bit with that? It'll make me feel a little better about where I'm projecting him. But
it's so funny with Toney because I like totally believe that game, that huge breakout game in Dallas was the full Toney. You know, the 190 yards and also punched somebody in the face and got kicked out of the game. I mean, I think that's like seems like him in a microcosm.
Yeah, I mean, he's like, I don't know. I'm trying to think of professional wrestlers that would fit with him. You know, Bruiser Brody, but I don't know. He's the Bruiser Brody.
Nobody's that old, man. Nobody remembers what a Bruiser.
Yeah, Brody. They should go back and watch Bruiser Brody. That's what I would say. But Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, I think 16 wide receivers drafted ahead of him in fantasy is probably He's a little low, but within range there. Now, in terms of actual NFL draft, I'm totally feeling where he's coming from there. He was probably one of the 3 to 5 best in that class.
I think we all are feeling this Detroit offense to some degree. A lot of good pieces, a lot of excitement from last year, and Jared Goff is a big part of that. So we'll be waiting to see for everyone to pay off. Sometimes in these offenses, Matt, not everyone does pay off. So somebody's going to be an odd man out here. I hope it's none of mine. All right, that's it for us this week.
Put another
I'm
quarter
off
in
next
a slot
week.
machine.
Hey, listen, man. I've been quit slagging on Curtis Samuel. Even when you're not slagging on him, I feel like you're slagging on him a little bit.
Man, I'm gonna have to take my lips and put them like right to the backside, right next to Matt Harmon of Curtis Samuel. And I don't know if I can, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to knock that big-haired dude like out of the way of doing that. So I might have to just wait in line. I'll take a number, Bob, and I'll let you know when I get that chance. It might be a good 10 years.
All right, I'm off next week. Somebody's going to get a chance to Wally Pitt me. Good luck on that.
That's
kid.
right. Good luck. We'll give them we'll let them have a real game shot at it. We'll try.
Love you. Goodbye.
Love you. Bye.